I'm good, and you?
Very well, thank you. I'm really excited to have you here today. Now, you are the founder of both NEFFA and MycoTEX. And I know that they are, if you like, symbiotic. They work together, but they are nonetheless separate entities. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say and to hear your thoughts. Where are you today? Where are you calling in from?
I'm actually at home in the Netherlands. It's 1 hour later, so it's around, well, dinner time. I don't know if that's, like 7:30. Is that dinner in London or in England?
I'm on the continent as well at the moment. I'm not in the UK right now, so I'm on your time. But I keep this on UK time because most of the time that's where I am, so that's why we have it at UK times. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us. Now, I know that some of the people that are going to tune in and are going to watch the recording of this will know who you are and a bit about your background. But for those that don't, I wondered if you could just share, firstly, some information on how you got involved in this space.
So my background is fashion design. I used to work for fashion companies like, well, Tommy Hilfiger is probably the most famous one, so very commercial fashion. But I always did side projects, and in 2008 I founded my company to focus on fashion innovation because, at that time you always see kind of a circle of fashion coming back. I mean, right now it's the same fashion that is out there as when I was a teenager, so there's always these things coming back, and there was not really innovation. And when I started looking for innovation, I first worked with a lot of technologies, so solar panels or LED lighting, and then slowly there came like these kind of workshops working with bacteria and with mycelium, and this is actually how I got interested in working with these technologies, and that I ended up with the companies that we're having now.
Oh, brilliant. And as a fellow veteran of the fashion industry, I worked in the fashion industry for several years, and ironically, actually, in 1994, my sort of first project in biodesign was a collection that was designed to biocompost, biodegrade at the end of the season. So it was pret-a-porter meets circularity before circular design was coined as a term. And sort of, like a lot of people in college, I had these big grand visions that the fashion industry would embrace this idea, because so say it's all about the new. But the several years that I spent working in the fashion industry were a really hard wake-up call, and I saw the wastage, I saw the inequity in the profits that were being taken from garments being made off in these factories, sweatshop labour and all the rest of it. What was your experience actually in the fashion industry, actually in the guts of the fashion industry, with respect to issues like wastage and the sort of things that have inspired you to take the direction that you have?
Well, I mean, the direction that I always used to have was to look outside the fashion industry and see what I can do. And this is something that I've done already at Art Academy, and that I've been doing all through my career. Also doing a lot of side projects next to my, what I call commercial fashion career. So for me, it was really normal to understand like what are others doing and how can we innovate the industry, but for the industry that's not normal. And what I mean basically that fashion is coming back is also with production. They want to stick to the production that they know and don't want to change anything, and still today this is actually why you see a lot of companies focusing on addressing issues that are in the conventional industry, because that's for the industry the easiest way to implement. That's not necessarily the best way for the planet to continue, though. And that's something that when I was working as a designer, I mean, you knew that some things were not right. And I've been traveling to the Far East and looking at a factory and thinking, is this actually the factory where it's produced, or is this just a clean factory to show for us being the clients? And It was until later that I actually learned a bit more about it. When I founded my own company, I started diving into, okay, what do I want to do? And then I saw a lot of sustainable fashion coming up, but it all looked like shit. Or if I may say that, sorry.
Thank you. You're in a safe space.
No, but it looked like my mother had washed these garments already like 100 times, and the discussions were about a button of cork. And I was like, well, if we're talking about sustainability, that's not how we are gonna get the majority of people to wear these garments, because most of the people want to have something that is fresh, has nice colors, and that's a cool design. And back then, well, when I started, at least that's 2008, that was not really the case. And so I actually went away from sustainability to focus more on innovation, but always with sustainability in my mind.
Yeah, and what I find interesting about your story is that I find that all the pioneers, whatever the space, and this was a very strong theme in BioFutures Series 1 when we were speaking with experts across the built environment, so architecture, urban design, etc. Those that come to the table with really disruptive, really important ideas are looking outside. They're not looking to the core of the industry. They are doing exactly what you're doing. They look to the innovation. And so there's that process of knowledge sharing. There's that process of sort of, if you like, rewriting, redrawing the canvas with all this other information. So, you know, that's really interesting that that's already coming through in this series too, focused on apparel, the body, and so forth. And the other thing that, you know, strikes me is I completely agree with you when you talk about, you know, the standards that there were in sustainable fashion. It became a bit of a joke, didn't it? You know, I would have sort of friends saying, well, you know, sustainable fashion, what's that sort of Jesus sandals and charity shops? Yeah. And I think,
exactly,
you know, one of the reasons why, you know, you were an obvious person to invite to this series, and the other ladies and individuals that we've got aboard were, if you like, individuals that I felt imperative to involve, is because you recognize that this is not a case of lowering the standards. This is a case of taking this new technology, these new ways of working, making, designing, distributing, etc., and creating something that is extremely beautiful and extremely desirable, potentially, but it creates a massive amount of disruption. So when did you launch MycoTEX? When did that sort of, if you like, form as an entity?
Well, it originated from a collaboration with Utrecht University and two other entities. And then over the course of time, I ended up doing my project only at the university. And after 2 years, we managed to develop well, what is called by the industry proof of concept. So it was a first dress made of mycelium discs. So what we did is we grew mycelium in Petri dishes, and by stacking them together over a 3D object, that's how then the mycelium disc bonded together by nature, and we created products. And that the first dress we launched in 2016. So basically in those 2 years, that's how I learned working with mycelium, and also got the concept of designing in 3D, because as a designer, for me, one of the reasons for us to keep garments longer and treat them better is when they fit perfectly. And I was a sucker for those TV shows that were transformative. So someone came in with like a bad teeth and bad wardrobe, and then they transformed, and they always gave them fitted garments, and you could see people blossoming up when they had like a jacket that fitted nicely, or a pair of jeans that was really for their body. And yeah, for me, this has been always the goal to do, but to do that on a mass production scale, that's challenging. And while working with these mycelium over the course of those 2 years, actually, I thought that, well, now I might have found a solution. I mean, this was my holy grail to something that we could potentially create on mass production scale, but then customized. So people now in the industry call it minimal order quantity of one, but yeah, those are the ideas that I developed back then.
And I think that's so interesting, because effectively, you know, on the one hand, we've got a trend that we've seen more generally in ideas about the development of apparel, in that bespoke quality, that one-off. Obviously, one of the things that's enabled that is things like placement printing, when you can actually, rather than print out a huge bit of fabric with particular design on it, you can print out the very specific pattern pieces and then amalgamate those without fabric wastage. And also, you know, there've been all sorts of ideas, but yours is, I mean, when you say you are the first sort of, you know, company in your areas in sort of the NEFFA project, you genuinely are, because you are actually looking at how we take biodesign and we make it, if you like, this is a splicing of mass production and Savile Row / couture, isn't it? Because you're talking about bespoke fits.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, it's not only the manufacturing method that we're looking at, we're looking also at design. So what you see right now, when you want to become a designer, you have to have pattern design skills. And there's a whole generation coming up that understands 3D design, like a rhino or grasshopper, and that doesn't know any pattern design. And with our method, this generation has an opportunity to start designing themselves, and a lot of it is now happening in the metaverse, but it's never producible. And so with our method, it's really future forward, because then that generation can actually in the future design their own product and eventually have it made by us. And I mean, I'm talking now about 10, 20 years in the future, but design is changing, and it's right now still for a lot of people made by one head designer, if we're talking for the couture, and a lot of designers that are helping it, or when you're talking about commercial fashion design, you have just a team around it, but you always need to have the skills. And everywhere you see that skilled people are becoming really difficult to get. And so if you can make creation a bit more easier by designing directly in 3D, rather than a designer has to translate their 3D vision to 2D patterns that are sewn together, that's also changing, I think, and important for the industry as well.
So you're splicing up the leading edge of digital and biomaterials and biodesign, and so in my head I'm thinking here, so what are you sort of envisaging a scenario where the individual can, let's say, use software, conventional software of some kind, maybe with artificial intelligence to allow the bespoke nature of the fits, and then that data, that information, those patterns in effect, are then fed into your bio fabrication process. Is that how this joins together? Yeah.
So when you have your design in 3D, then you can send it to us, or right now, of course, we do the 3D design ourselves, and then based on that we create a mold, and we have different techniques to create molds, and we're also looking in the future in configurable molds, but right now we're trying to get lightweight and recyclable molds. And then the biomass that we grow from mycelium, which in our case is done by liquid fermentation. So I don't know if the audience understands liquid fermentation, but it's...
assume that we're going to have quite a broad audience, particularly with the recordings. So go ahead and explain. Yeah,
so liquid fermentation, you can imagine like you have a big vat and you put in water and sugars and minerals, and we put in tiny bits of mycelium, and mycelium is then the root structure of a fungus. And then over the course of around a week, we create all tiny pellets, tiny pieces of mycelium, and then we filter those out, and we have what we call our secret sauce added into the mycelium to create the actual textile, and then we apply that onto molds, and this is the mold that is the design from our designer, or in the future from every designer. And then during the drying process, the material bonds together by nature, and then it forms the textile, and then you can take it off, and if you want, you can add some embellishments, and then you can start using it or wearing it, depending on the product, what you want to have.
Beautiful. I've seen on your, I'd advise everyone after this session to look at your Instagram page, because you've got some beautiful pictures of these moldings. They feel to me almost ancient, in that they remind me of the sort of the body protection that we would have seen princesses wearing, riding chariots. But there is beautiful sculptural feel to them. And you can see that they are literally, they're sort of, they are following the form of the body. It's very, very clear in the existing prototypes that you've got. What sort of variation on that can you sort of envisage? Because when I looked at the images that you've got on the Instagram page and on your site and so forth, they look quite robust. They look like, as I said, sort of almost armor. Do you have variations that are slightly more lightweight, or what kind of sort of structural variability do you have in these 3D printed items?
Yeah, so the flexibility, because that's actually what we're then talking about, because I get a lot from people that they think that it's like really sturdy and armor-like, but in fact it is flexible, it is a textile. But what we can do is really engineer the material to the product. So in such a armor piece, you want to have everything on the same place. But if you want to make maybe more like a top, you would want to have it a bit more flowy, maybe a little bit thinner quality. And so really depending on the product, that's how we design the recipe and application. And so typically in footwear, they want to have a thicker material that is more sturdy and more tough. Lightning, they want to have it really almost hard. And so you can really play with the recipe in that sense. And that's actually the beauty of nature. We're not making one product where we can really custom fit also the material to the product. So.
Brilliant. You know, it's so obvious. I hadn't thought of shoes, but of course, and that is wonderful, because at the moment we're in this terrible situation where, of course, profit has been put above, if you like, the consumer in the shoe market. Yeah. Very, very few companies do half sizes. So, and most people don't have evenly shaped feet. Most people have a half size or near enough difference in their feet. So they're actually wearing misfitting shoes. So already I'm thinking you've got a great model for diversification across, obviously, apparel, shoes, accessories. Yeah. I mean, the sky's the limit on this, isn't it? It's got such massive potential. In terms of the sort of the reaction of industry, have you found that industry is being very proactive in its engagement with you, or do you find that you're sort of experiencing what some others are experiencing, wherein there's sort of this, it's almost like an observation period, it's almost sort of a stand back and watch what happens?
It's a bit of both, I would say, and it really depends on the client. So last year we launched a video that is also on our website that really, it's really the vision that we have for the future of manufacturing. But before, we got a lot of companies asking us for material, and they didn't get the part that we were not doing only the material, but doing a full manufacturing method. And so last year we changed, and we had the company create this super nice video for us. And so now the audience that is replying to us is changing slightly, and people are more and more interested in the manufacturing way. And what we see is that a lot of the people that focused in the past on material developments have come to realize that either a lot of the materials are backed with a backing, so there's like a cotton layer or a synthetic layer, and that's then covered with maybe a PU with apple powder or any other natural residue in it. But you see also some mycelium competitors working with a textile backing, and we are one of the few that are eliminating the textile backing. And so that means that you don't have to look for cotton, spin and weave and make sure that that's integrated in a good way. I'm lost what I wanted to say.
And I was also thinking, in terms of, obviously, so at the end of life, these garments are compostable. They can be reabsorbed into the environment safely, and obviously giving back nutrients, and, you know, part of that sort of more broadly circular design. In terms of, let's say, you know, I was a customer and I had a custom fit outfit made. What would the lifespan that you would envisage for that piece be, and what would the sort of the special care be work, you know, to look after, to preserve, to keep clean this material?
The lifespan will depend on the owner. So just like any other material, we have to meet the technical standards. And we're meeting those, so that's not the issue, but it will depend on the owner. So when you're fed up with it after 2 years, you could resell it, but you could also compost it. And this is, eventually I think it also has to do with the type of product you're making. If it is luxury, most people will typically spend more money on it and keep it for longer. But eventually we want to also be offering it to fast fashion companies, and then typically the lifespan is 1 or 2 years. They say on average you wear your garments only 7 times, which whenever I tell that story, then people are like, oh, no way, that's not me. Well, I urge you to look in your closet, look for pieces that you haven't worn in several years, look for pieces that might have still the hang tag, and be honest with yourself. I'm sure you haven't worn them for a long time. So particularly with that in mind, that's why we designed also the idea of this shorter supply chain, because if it is meant to be having a shorter end of life, then you also don't want to have a lot of chemicals involved, and you ideally want to have it home compostable, because what right now we're sending our stuff, our waste basically, to Africa and other continents, but they don't want our stuff anymore because they only get like the crappy products. And so we need to have a solution that is actually on a global scale, and recycling is not a global solution in my opinion. And so this is also why we're focusing a lot on home compostable. And then in terms of caring, we don't want people to wash our garments, because when we are making, like, we're trying to make the most sustainable supply chain. And then when a consumer buys it and starts washing it a lot, then it's harming the environment again, because a lot of water usage and a lot of laundry detergent is used, and most of the times also way too much. So we advise our clients then just to wipe it off with a cloth, just like with leather or with plastics. Most of the times you also just wipe it off with a cloth.
Brilliant. So no dry cleaning. I hate dry cleaning. No dry cleaning.
No.
Brilliant. That in itself is a win. And thinking about your sources, where you're getting the materials from. Obviously, you're working with mycelium, but I know, thinking to, let's say, the built environment, Biome are working with a number of companies like McCain's, the chip manufacturers, taking food waste that they then use in their material production process. Do you see your material process actually integrating waste streams, or do you see your source materials coming from somewhere else?
No, we actually think of integrating waste streams. The only thing is that right now our main priority is to get the first products on the market, and well, while doing that, you want to work with materials that are always the same and not changing. And when working with waste streams, there might be some changes. So, but once we're scaling up, then of course we're looking for these. And right now we're already investigating who are the parties that we can talk to that have waste streams. And this could be even for the medium, the growing medium. There you can make use of waste streams. And in that sense, there's also a growing awareness in the fashion industry and a growing knowledge about culturing of mycelium, but also maybe algae or yeast. And what they typically don't want is that we use food derived, so sugar that could be used for food resources or other ingredients. And we have been already looking quite quickly for these kind of things, and are already working with some of these companies to eliminate like having food resources, but to really work with recyclable resources basically.
Brilliant. And in terms of scaling, do you see, obviously, so historically the fashion industry or the textile industry, fashion and textile and production industry, we can think of it as globalized on one level, and obviously from the Industrial Revolution we had places like Manchester became hubs of textile production and export, or obviously Asia and silk production. But then we, if you like, went even sort of more linear in the production process. So China has obviously become a massive locale of production of garments, Bangladesh, etc. Do you see the scaling of the factories that you're pioneering, the biofabrication processes, as being very centralized, or do you see them as being very decentralized? Do you see sort of great big centers, big factories, or do you see sort of medium to small sized factories that are distributed across a large area?
Well, our goal is to have local manufacturing, and local initially would be more continental. So we're setting it up in Europe for the European market. All our partners are currently also European. So what you see, for example, I mean, you refer to the footwear industry, and the issue what they have there is that they can produce it more locally, but then they're still relying on materials that have to come from China, for example. And that's the issue that we saw with COVID. That's not reliable anymore, and also with all the transport issues. So people are not only looking for local manufacturing, but having also the material locally made. So we're now talking with a company in France that can grow the mycelium, for example. So then that would be maybe probably initially in only one location, because that's a quite expensive process that you want to have as big as possible. But then the manufacturers could be all over Europe. So it could be that we have some in Italy, some in Germany, some in Spain. So, and then they would get the material from this single location in France. That and then it's much easier to produce.
Yeah, so it's brilliant. So I mean, it's troubleshooting so many issues. It's doing what great biodesign, biomaterials, and biofabrication does. You've obviously got a model here where you are stripping out the pollution. You're stripping out the water wastage, you're stripping out obviously the carbon emissions, you are localizing the process, and so again you're bringing down the environmental footprints while also creating economic opportunities in many and very different places. And then with all of this, you've got a fantastic new model for creating bespoke garments that won't go to landfill, that will be reabsorbed by the environment. It's so many wins, isn't it? There are so many levels here, so many boxes genuinely being ticked. This is not greenwash. This is not, we see so much greenwash in fashion. And, you know, in some ways I've been shocked by how slow fashion has been to actually really take on board the issues to be tackled. I mean, it's literally taken more than 25 years before we've seen the needle move much at all, haven't we? But we are now seeing in some areas, I think, a genuine shift. It seems that diversity is one of those issues, obviously with the recent edition of Vogue, the edition that's actually coming out next month. The entire British Vogue edition is going to be populated by women with disabilities and other people with, you know, sort of diverse issues. And it seems that that's taken off, but this still seems really slow. And I think, you know, the Met Gala ball happened earlier this week. How many sustainable outfits were there? I mean, you know, and you sort of think the Met Museum, there's more than enough work around the world now to actually facilitate a whole exhibition on this at the Met or the V&A. Well, in fact, the V&A has done a few biodesign exhibitions, but you think the Met, you know, could host a major exhibition on that, and yet it hasn't. How long do you instinctively feel this is going to take for mainstream fashion? Obviously, you've worked with mainstream fashion, you work with Tommy Hilfiger, among other brands. How long do you instinctively feel it's going to take for them to actually get this and get the potential?
It will depend on the brand and the strategy of the brand. So what you see right now, and just to add a quick note, yes, what you said, we're all doing that, but we're not there yet. So I want to, like, we have this vision where we want to get, but every day it's a challenge to improve. So by all means, we're not there yet. And I think this is something that, also the industry has to realize. We should be focusing more on how to improve and taking next steps rather than having something that is already ready for market launch. And I think this is, on one hand, delaying for some brands why they want to start using maybe sustainable materials or new manufacturing methods. But on the other hand, I mean, sometimes it's a chicken and the egg. When they're not willing to work with startups like ours, then nothing will happen, and we can't get anything ahead without them. So it's really coming down to collaboration. But there's also a lot of what you said already, greenwashing. The thing is that at the moment, if a company is doing something and they're failing, then they get bashed. And this is becoming for a lot of companies an issue, because that makes them think twice. How should I communicate? Should I even do something? Because currently the companies that are not doing nothing, they're free. That's fine. And so I think in general, this has to change. Like our concept of sustainability has to change in the fact of we're improving step by step for the long run. And we should be thankful to the brands that are trying, because Tommy Hilfiger is actually working on this topic. You have an H&M working on this topic. H&M is getting bashed a lot, but they're were one of the earliest to recognize that they had to do something, and they're trying, and they're not always successful, but they're learning from it and improving. And so actually, it's not a luxury focus or a premium focus or fast fashion focus. It's happening industry wide, but the issue is more like, okay, how do we communicate this outside? And make sure that it's a process of improvement. And please don't bash these companies for, not being perfect. I mean, no one is, but we're always trying. And if someone already had the answer, then we would all follow him probably. But that's not the case.
Yeah. There has to be experimentation. There has to be failure. And as you said, I mean, H&M have made a lot of mistakes, but they've also had a degree of genius in that they've effectively created a number of different angles on sustainability with a number of different collections. And at the back end, I know they've been working with Worn Again for a long time now, and Worn Again, of course, have been looking at the circular economy, but not from the perspective of compostable materials, but from waste streams. I mean, even working with one of their earliest projects was working with discarded fire hose textile. I mean, that's pretty limited in terms of what you can do with it, but they took that challenge, and then I think they had aeroplane covers from the seat covers of aeroplanes. That was another project. So they've H&M, I think, as you say, they've been very much on this for a long time, and I think they're finally at the point of really kind of getting there. They are making a lot fewer mistakes now. But the other thing that strikes me that's a real opportunity here, so the high street has famously died around many places in the world, particularly in the UK. I don't know about, well, in fact, I guess much of Europe didn't necessarily have this sort of high street culture of the UK, but Britain, home of retail, many high streets in the UK, even in London, are now full of boarded up shops, retailers that have gone bust, clothing retailers that have gone bust. And initially that was blamed on the online shopping, companies like, Amazon, among others. But the reality was that there'd been this dearth of innovation for years. We haven't really seen that much in the way of innovation in terms of the physical retail site. Can you see your vision being integrated into the retail environment? How do you see that connectivity between what you can create in these bespoke products and the end consumer?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I think in the end it will depend on how quickly we could produce, because if you go into a retail environment, then most of the times you want to bring something home. So from a design point of view, I can imagine that you can go to a store, there's someone that can help you with the design, that eventually there will be a library of different products that you could choose out. It's quite easy if you have a basic model and when you have your body scan to adjust that. So from that point of view, yes. And I know that, so we are working with a German shoe machine manufacturer that is developing the robotic line for us. And they are extremely knowledgeable in creating any robotic line. And they would love to have this concept in a store where you could go in the store and then leave in their case with a pair of shoes. So yeah, I can imagine that, but we'll take some more time from our side to really speed up, so that maybe, yeah, because I think it all has to do with timing. So if you go into a store and you see the design, you made your choice, and then you can do some more shopping, and then after 2 hours you can pick it up. Yeah, then I totally get it. But then we need to put a bit more work on that still.
So maybe
yeah.
if we bring in, I'm thinking if we bring in the merchandisers, if we bring in the experts in retail sales. I mean, one of the reasons why I think the high street culture of shopping in Britain died was not only of the total absence of innovation, but this failure to recognize, and this is what all the great luxury brands do well, you're not really selling the garment, you're selling the dream, you're selling the concept.
Yeah.
It's what Bieber did, isn't it? It's the 60s retail environment. They kind of made it an experience. We know the big luxury brands are onto this now, because many of them experimenting with the metaverse, which I think is kind of a bit overhyped now. There's potential there, but there's so much sort of focus on that it's at the expense of other things. They're looking at other ways of diversifying the brand, and you think, well, with this they could actually create something that is very compelling and attractive, and they could actually, even for the high street, they could bring in an element that makes it desirable from the lifestyle perspective. So for example, historically, though, if you're going into a high street store to buy a pret-a-porter item, a machined item, standard fit, yeah, you would normally buy it there and then take it away. But on the other hand, if you went to Savile Row, you don't rock in and buy your suit there and then, do you? You don't sort of, they don't rip it up. You go in, they take your measurements, you go away, you go back for another fitting, you go away, you go back, there's your beautiful bespoke suit that makes $1 million. Maybe that's where if we kind of brought in this element, the experts in the sort of the consumer psychology, building that lifestyle experience, that would be an opportunity for that in-store element of a technology like the one that you're developing.
Yeah, it would be, and I can also imagine, what you have in Savile Row is they show you like several textiles that you can choose from, the different fabrics, the colors, and that's something that we could do as well. But what I also do, so I've done a lot on personalization and approach that from various angles. And if you give people too much choice, they are not making a decision. So it's like when going in a restaurant. If you have only 10 things on the menu, you know exactly what you want. But come in with a menu with 50 pieces, 50 recipes, you don't know what you want to choose. So in that sense, we also have to then make sure that there's just a limited amount of possibilities there. I don't know if you ever made the sneaker. I think Nike had and Adidas both had it, where you could personalize it. And I mean, I'm a designer myself, and I stopped doing it at a certain point because none of it was like my liking. And I was like, I just fancy going into a store and seeing one that I like and buying that one, rather than I was already sitting 3 hours. I mean, probably in that time I would have bought a pair of shoes. So of course this is personal for everyone, but it should be made also then quite simple.
Yeah. And also, it is the designer is the expert, aren't they? They are the expert on what is going to work really well with that person's particular physique, what's going to work well within the context of the garment use and so forth. So I think there's a great beauty to that. And, the other thing that strikes me here, we're at this moment in time when I'm a big critique of AI, more specifically where an AI harvests all this creativity, all this talent from hundreds of thousands of people around the world, artists, illustrators, filmmakers, you name it. And then it kind of regurgitates these replicants and all this messaging around, this, that, and the other creative, they're not going to be needed because people are just going to use an AI software program. I think the beauty for what you're doing is that, yes, you have the capacity to use AI in an intelligent way, i.e. to work out what's the optimized fit, working with that very specific material and its molecular structure and all the rest of it. But this has a very analog, a very hands-on feel to it. This feels almost like a splicing of factory and the sort of ancient craft of garment production.
Well, I mean, I quite like AI because it can give you inspiration, and if you use it like that, it can be really good. But it also shows a lot of images that people think that that's actually producible, and while in reality it is actually not. So this is like I have like mixed feelings about that. But as with certain brands, so we cannot work with certain brands because they have the handcraft highly in mind. And with them, it is really about someone, a person, spending hours of work on a product, and that's what you want to buy. And then we are on the opposite, trying to make a product as quickly as possible, fully automated. So I think you will always, also with AI, there will be people that like it, and there will be people that hate it, and there will still be people that like the concept of drawing on a piece of paper. So I think as a human being, you always want to be creative, and as when computers came, they thought that it would ruin all our jobs. I haven't seen more creative than nowadays because it gave us a lot of other creativity jobs. I don't know if that works with AI. I don't think anyone knows, but for sure, we want to create, and we will continue to do as mankind, I would say.
What do you think is the biggest barrier to scaling at the moment in terms of the vision that you have? What do you think are the biggest hurdles to sort of step over? Are they cultural? Are they business infrastructure? Are they policy? What do you think is a problem here?
Finances? No. No, getting funded is for sure one of the things, but yeah, I'm a bit impatient. So in my case, I think we're not going quick enough. We could go much quicker, but for that we need more people to be able to do that. I think there is enough brands outside that want to work with us already in this stage. When you have a startup, it's constantly making a puzzle fit. Because you need to attract clients that want to work with your method. You need to have funding to be able to deliver everything, and you need to have the technology get on time. And it all should fit. Like there's this game online where things are turning, and then suddenly it's fitting, and then it's turning again, and it's fitting differently. And that's kind of the puzzle that we are, as a startup, you're constantly making. So there are different things. Yeah. For sure, I would like to speed it up, but sometimes it's just what it is, and you have to work with what you have.
Yeah. And if, let's say, there was somebody watching this, I mean, obviously a lot of talent is coming into particularly biomaterials. We've got all sorts of projects, and obviously that's pretty accessible in that I know there's a lot of workshops online and in person where people can go and learn the basics. But if, let's say, a young say 20-something person is watching this thinking, I really want to go into this, I love this whole concept, what would be your advice as to how they would get into, train for this, get into the industry, start to build that future career?
The main thing I would say is really start doing actually these workshops and get hands-on, and do not overthink things too much, because first you need to understand if you like what you're doing, and it will help you a lot if you understand what you're doing. I'm getting a lot of questions of people that want to ask me for help, but then I don't know what they did, and most of the times they haven't done anything. Yeah, I can't help you with that because you don't know what you're talking about. So yeah, get acquainted with the topic. As you said, there are several locations where you can, get the basics of how to grow fungi. There's a lot online. You can grow kombucha. You don't even need laboratory space for that. So experiment a lot and build a network. Go outside, talk with people. That's often more easier than just writing 10 emails online. It's really going to these events and try to talk with people, because at those events they have the time. I always have more time when I'm at an event and you want to ask me questions, then we can have a conversation. But when I'm emailing, when I'm in my at my office, then I have a ton of other things to do. So take the advantage of going to these events, and that will help you a lot. People are more willing to help you if you have done already some things of your own and you learn from failures, or you have like direct questions.
Well, I have just 2 more questions, but those people that are watching, if you've got a question for Aniela, then write it in the comments, because it's easier to see than if you put it in the question space. So my first question for you is the year, and this is a bit of a cliche, but run with me on this. The year is 2050. How do you see the developed? What is your vision for the future of this field by mid-century?
Well, it would be nice if we just could order materials ourselves and create products in our home that then can be composted or eventually turned into new products. That would be my vision, my dream.
Excellent. So you like literally just order up the materials and so that they can have personal access to this in a very, what we might call, mechanized and efficient way. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, we're working a lot on local production and decentralization, and that would be the ultimate goal.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah. And the next question I've got for you is, if you had just one wish, a genie pops out of a bottle and says to you, Aniela, you can have one wish. It can be for you, it can be for the company, it can be for the whole bio design sector. What would it be?
Yeah, well, I would be more for the industry, I would say. I hope that there are more people willing to look outside the box, trying to do different things and improving the industry.
Brilliant. So you want more people to come to it, more people to get involved, get engaged, etc.
Yeah, because honestly, this is my way of doing it, and the vision that we now have created as a company, also with my partner Licoline. But we don't know if this is the right one, and if we really want to stay living on this planet dramatically, but then we need more solutions. And I honestly don't believe in solving the short term. In my opinion, these are short term issues that when we're improving dyeing processes or improving a material, those are like very fragmented processes. And I think there should be more space for this holistic view. Like I have this material. How do I get to an end product in the most sustainable and quickest way possible that's not harming the environment? Basically, that's how we started. And I think that if more people start looking into the subject from that point of view, we get much more ideas and then some of them will remain and hopefully then become the major manufacturing methods.
Brilliant. Well, I'm confident that vision is going to come true. There's a massive amount of interest in this area, and it does seem that in particular, as I said, the biomaterial seems to be the particular space that is attracting the most talent, but more generally we're starting to see that shift. And although it's taken a long time in fashion and apparel to get to this stage, I think we're close to liftoff. I mean, we've just had, obviously, Stella McCartney introduced the biodegradable sequins into their collection. Obviously, her brand's giving this a lot of visibility, and it does feel that we're on the cusp. So it's been a real pleasure to have you in the series, Aniela.
Thank you for having me.
I hope everybody has enjoyed this session. If you have any questions that come to you afterwards, then post them in the comments, because we can always come back to them. Now, we've got many other really dynamic individuals that are joining this series. So we you know, we've got really sort of most angles, I would say, covered, particularly on the fashion and apparel, because that, as I said, is the area that's really getting traction at the moment. I will be announcing the next, it's actually a lady in the series, in the next couple of days. And I hope that you come back and join us for those. And if you want to watch the recording of this, if you missed part of it, you can look to the archive section, the Reels section on my page, and this will go onto YouTube eventually, and there will be a film that sort of aggregates the best bits and the kind of key insights as well. So thank you again, Aniela, and thank you to everybody that has joined us this evening.
Thanks for having me. Yeah? Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.